Okay, there we go. All right, perfect. So since this is a relatively small group today, I think, if you have any questions immediately you just like to ask, you can go ahead and just, raise your hand and then we'll be able to stop and then maybe talk about individual situations or anything you might just need to know. But my name is Joseph. I'm a financial aid counselor here at SFSU. And we also have Marie Nicole as well here, who will be able to answer questions in the chat if you have any off top that you would just like to put in. But this FinAid Friday is specifically a FAFSA walkthrough for the 26-27 FAFSA. So I'm going to be going a little bit into, what the FAFSA is, how financial aid sort of works, and then also just a like a trial run of what it's like to fill out a FAFSA. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. And just really quickly, what is financial aid and specifically what is the FAFSA? Well, FAFSA is an acronym. It stands for Free Application for Federal and Student Aid. It's essentially how you and, other students get funding for your education. So it can help families pay for college. It includes grants, loans, and federal work study, and along with scholarships as well. So you're going to want to make sure that you do your FAFSA. And, thankfully, since October 1st, the 26-27 FAFSA is now open, so you can actually go ahead and get that started. The deadline for the 26-27 FAFSA, and this is typically every FAFSA's deadline, is March 2nd. That is the state priority deadline. So you'll always want to make sure that when you're about to start a new school year and you're thinking about applying for the FAFSA, you want to get it done before March 2nd. That is the priority deadline. It is seriously important to make sure that you keep that date in the back of your head at all times, because if you get your info in before then, you're able to make corrections after the fact and then, deal with maybe issues that would end up being prolonged later. So you just want to make sure that you're able to get everything in on time before March 2nd for the FAFSA, and also goes for the CADA as well. And like I said, you will have to be doing a new FAFSA every year. And FAFSA, it extends all the way into summer of the latter year. So you'll notice that the FAFSA has like 2 years attached to it. In this case, it's 26-27. So the 26-27 FAFSA will extend all the way until summer of 2027. So it'll start in fall 26, then go to spring 27, and then the last semester that'll be covered by this 26-27 FAFSA is that summer term. And just a little bit about the FAFSA versus the CATA, which one should you be doing? If you're a US citizen, you're most likely going to want to be doing the FAFSA. That is the federal application where you'll be able to see if you're eligible for federal aid. If you are AB 540 eligible and a non-resident, you can do the CATA. So we have these QR codes here, which will take you to the respective sites where you can fill out each of the applications. You'll also want to note that for the CATA specifically, it'll take you to California Student Aid Commission's website. But even if you're doing the FAFSA, you will also want to go on to California Student Aid Commission to check in on some of your state grants, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So I'll just kind of leave this up for 1 second. If you wanted to take a picture of this and save it for later, or if you want me to go back to these QR codes, we of course could, but this specifically is just going to be a walkthrough, so I don't think we need to spend too much time on that. But if you do need help with the CATA specifically, we do have resources that are tethered to the CATA itself. So CSAC is that California Student Aid Commission that I was talking about. That website is where you're going to want to go for specific information, also where you'd fill out that CATA. And our office specifically has a page dedicated to the DREAM Act itself, and then resources regarding, getting help with CATA, and then anything that you would need in that regards and how it relates to our office. And then also we have the Dream Resource Center here at SF State. And so that's the link down there, drc@sfsu.edu. If you need any help with Dream resources, this is definitely going to be very useful for you, and you're going to want to save this. And just a little bit about what's new with the 26-27 FAFSA. So they did change it. It's not as changed as it was when they did simplification a few years ago. But going from the 25-26 FAFSA to the new 26-27, it is easier to invite contributors. You're just going to need their email. So you'll just be able to invite contributors to your application much easier. They also changed the way you record certain assets for the application. We'll get a little bit into that. It might not affect you, but it does have to do with if you own businesses or certain farms and things like that. There also are some Pell eligibility changes, which won't necessarily change the way you fill out the application, but once you have filled it out and you get your award back, there are changes to how the FAFSA considers Pell eligibility. And this is, I believe this is the earliest launch date that they've had for the FAFSA ever, October 1st. They're going to really try and push for making sure that the FAFSA is accessible as early as possible now, because in previous terms it was taking a little bit while to become available. And so now they're really going to start making sure they push it out on an earlier date. So if this is your first time completing the FAFSA, you're going to need to make an FSA ID. It's just a federal student aid ID. You'll have to log into studentaid.gov and just, create an account and set up some of your personal information, and it'll create an FSA ID for you. And so that's what you're going to be using to fill out your application, and also any of your contributors. So whoever you're inviting to the FAFSA, to fill out their portion, they'll also need an FSA ID. So they'll go through that same process of just creating an account. And we'll kind of, we won't simulate creating the account, but we'll show you what it looks like when you invite a contributor. But you just want to keep that in mind. If somebody's going to be adding their financial information to your FAFSA, they're going to need to be making an FSA ID account. And also, what you're going to need for your 26, 27 application, these are just things where I would also take a picture of this if you're planning on starting pretty soon, because it is important to know you're going to need your tax returns from the base year that the FAFSA is referencing. So in this case, you're going to need tax information from the year 2024. So it'll always be 2 years before the application, or before the first year of that application. So you'll notice it's 2026, and you're going to need tax information from 2 years ago. You're also going to need records of any child support received. That would be in the previous year. And then also just records of like cash savings and checking accounts, net worth and investments, as well as businesses and farms. Like I said, there were some changes about specifically it's like fish hatcheries and then businesses with under 1,000 employees. So if that doesn't apply to you, then don't worry about it, but you will just need to keep that information on hand if you do. And then also you'll need a list of schools that you're applying to. And for each application that you send out, you can list up to 20. So if you have, between 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 schools that you're going to add, that's totally fine. If you have more than 20, you'll basically need to send the application out and then go back and then correct it after you've completed the form and then add those schools later. But you can list up to 20 for each FAFSA that you submit. And also, it's important to note, if you are going to be adding SFSU, we have a specific school code. You will be able to type in San Francisco State University and then find us that way. But our school code specifically is 001154. So you're going to want to keep that in mind. And like I said before, if you are a dependent student, you are going to have to invite a contributor to your form. And so we'll show you something called the Parent Wizard, which can kind of help you figure out who will be your contributor. And that is the person that you're going to be inviting to your FAFSA form. So just a little bit about dependency status. The application will ask you questions and make that determination for you. We want you to know that the way that the FAFSA considers dependency status is a little bit different than how it's considered on something like your taxes. So you may be supporting yourself, but financially, but if you're under the age of 24, you're most likely going to be considered dependent by FAFSA. That just has to do with the way that they make all their considerations. So if you're under the age of 24 and you're an undergraduate student, you're most likely going to be considered dependent, and you will have to add a contributor to your application. So who is my contributor? Well, we actually have a handy dandy parent wizard. This is a website here where you can put in some information about your family and your parents, and then it makes that determination for you of who you would consider. So I'll just say my first parent's name is John, and then maybe my second one's name is Mary. And we can just go ahead and hit continue here. And then it'll ask you questions like this. This is similar to how it asks on the FAFSA as well. But so you say, are John and Mary married to each other? And you say, yes, yes, they are. And so you'll only need to invite one parent. Okay, so it's basically giving you the answer right here. It says you'll only need to invite one parent to the FAFSA. The parent should report their current marital status if they're married or not separate, or if their marital status as married, and then in parentheses, not separated. So if they file jointly, only one parent is going to need to be required to be the contributor. And then that's the person who will you'll send the email to, and then they will fill out their portion of the FAFSA. And then again, we'll show you how all that works in a second here. So this is a great website here, this FAFSA Parent Wizard. This is the link right here if you want to have that saved. And then, we'll go ahead and we can go back to that too if you just want to see it. But since we pretty much have that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and just assume we could start the application right now. Like I said, you would just need your student aid ID. You don't have to fill it out right now if you don't want to, but we will just kind of do the simulation so you get an idea of what it looks like. And so we're going to do the prototype. The prototype is it is in like a simulation of the application here. If you want this link to, it is on the presentation because you will need a password to actually access it. So we can go ahead and visit the prototype. And right when you enter the page, it's just going to give you some information about the prototype itself. So it doesn't have full functionality of the FAFSA. There are certain situations that you can't simulate just because it kind of creates certain circumstances that we would have to deal with on a case-by-case basis. So it's really just meant to show you generally what the questions are that are going to be asked, and we'll also be able to talk a little bit about some questions that might periodically cause some problems when it comes to filling out the FAFSA. So we're going to go ahead and just do this first simulation here, which is Ryan just simulating a new application being created. So we'll go ahead and do launch this user. This is the FSA ID that we were talking about. So when you create an account up here on studentaid.gov, you'll make one of these handles essentially. This will be your FSA ID and then the password. And so you can go ahead and just log in here. This is the homepage that you'll see, and it'll be advertising starting the 26-27 FAFSA application. So you can still submit the 25-26 application down here or edit a previous form, but we're going to do the 26-27 just by hitting start form here. And so Trin is a student, so you only have two options here. You'll either do student or parent. You go ahead and just do student. And similarly to the presentation, this just gives you a little bit of an overview of some of the things that you'll need, and then also just what the FAFSA is. So it's telling you you're going to need tax returns, records of child support received, and then cash savings and checking accounts. And there's a little informative video for you as well, which we don't need to watch. There's also a little bit of information about the contributors as well. So similarly to what we were talking about before, there's just some info about the contributors and who you would need to invite to your application, and then also how to invite. So it simulates that at the end as well, but we can also answer any questions about that if you have any. And then just a little bit about what to expect. So you will have to provide consent to give your tax information over to FAFSA so they can use what's called the IRS retrieval tool. Once you do give consent for this, it can't be rescinded and it is given for the whole year. So just keep that in mind. When you do fill out the application, you're essentially giving FAFSA the okay to use your IRS records. So just keep that in mind because after this, it'll just say what happens after you submit the FAFSA. So you'll have to wait a little bit for it to be processed, and then you'll be updated with what's referred to as your SAI, which is your student aid index. And that's essentially the number that's used to determine your aid eligibility. And so we can just go ahead and hit start form here. This is the information that you're going to be putting in when you make your FSA ID. So it is just all of your sensitive information that you would just want to keep on you in between you and your parents. And you would just want to review everything, make sure that it's correct, because if there is something that's out of the ordinary or misaligned with your records, it may create an issue. So just double check and make sure all your personal information is correct, your address, the city, the state, and the zip code, and everything like that. You can just hit continue. And then it'll ask you the state that you're residing in, and then when you became a resident of the state. So if you're born there, you would just put your birthday. But in this case, it's just a prototype, so we can just say whatever we want. So we'll just say I've been a resident here since 2010. All right, and then this is the consent page that I was talking about. So I do recommend just giving it a read and just seeing what's happening here, because it's basically just saying the Department of Education will disclose your personal information to the IRS. So if you have any problem with this, then it will create some issues. Uh, you won't be able to receive aid through the FAFSA if you don't consent to this. So just keep that in mind. But you can go ahead and just hit approve if you're okay with that. And then this is when they'll be using the IRS retrieval. So it'll be getting your information from the IRS, and then we did it. Success. Good job. You've confirmed your information with the IRS, and you can go ahead and hit continue here. And now it'll ask you some questions about your personal circumstances. So this is kind of the meat of the FAFSA. This is where you're going to be needing to have this information on you. So it'll ask you your current marital status. So remember, we're Raya Tran. We can just say, let's just say we're single, never married, and go ahead and hit continue here. And what is your college experience or career plan? So maybe you just graduated high school and you're about to be a freshman. So you would just hit first year freshman here. And then this question is asking you if you've completed a bachelor's degree before. So, I just graduated high school, so that would definitely not be the case. So at the start of the 26-27 school year, which is fall 26, well, I've had a bachelor's degree. No, I would not have. So you would just hit no and move forward here. And then, personal questions, specifically, these would have to do with your dependency and other references. So you would just have to check if any of these are applicable to you. If you're a veteran, if you're in foster care, if they were awarded a court by any chance. Otherwise, you would just hit none of these apply. But of course, every student situation is different. And then at risk of homelessness as well. So this is just, a yes or no question. At any time on or before July 1st, 2025, was a student unaccompanied and or either at risk of being homeless? So we'll just say no for this student and then move forward here. And students' unusual circumstances. So similarly to the other questions, this also it may affect your dependency. The school would require more information from you if you were to say yes to some of the previous questions, including this one. So in this case, we'll just go ahead and say no. Some of these answers on the prototype, it won't actually give you the option of doing the other choices, because it just kind of does create other questions as well. So direct unsubsidized loan only. Are the student's parents refusing to provide their consent? Your contributor or parent will have to provide their information on the FAFSA. Otherwise, you will not be eligible to receive, um, you know, rewards through the FAFSA. So you are going to have to either you know, say that yes, they will give consent, because if you don't, then you will only be eligible to receive unsubsidized loans. So we just go ahead and hit no, go forward. And then more demographic information specifically. So we'll say Raya is a male and move forward here. And then this is just demographic information for records and stuff. It's not going to affect your eligibility or anything like that. So you can just go ahead and say that they are Tongan and continue. Okay, and then citizenship status. So most of the time, students who are filling out the FAFSA may be a U.S. citizen, but every student situation is different. So you would just put whatever is relevant to your situation here. So we'll say that Raya is a U.S. citizen or national. Go ahead and move forward here. And then parental education status as well. So maybe neither of your parents attended college, or maybe, one or more did, or maybe, they both graduated. So you could say any of these, again, whatever your situation is. So maybe, one of them did. You just go ahead and hit continue here. And was a parent killed in the line of duty? So, this is another personal question here that is going to be, different for every student. So this is just specifically asking if, while serving, either as a member of the armed forces or, on active duty, or as a public safety officer, so firefighter or police officer, did they die in the line of duty? For this student, for Red Tram, we can just go ahead and say no here and then move forward. And then for their high school completion status, so you will have to have a high school equivalent degree in order to be eligible for Title IV funds, which would be, aid provided through the FAFSA. So either of these could be possible. You could get the high school equivalent um, through like a GED certificate or through homeschooling. But maybe you just went to, a public high school, so you could just go ahead and hit that you have your high school diploma and then do continue here. And for the prototype specifically, the schools aren't these are kind of not real schools, but when you're doing your actual application, you're going to want to put, where you graduated from high school. So we'll just say that I went to a Californian high school and it was over in it was in Belfast, and the school's name was Troy A. Howard Middle School, which is also a high school. And that is definitely where I graduated from high school. And so we can just go ahead and hit continue here. And then you'll confirm this. You'll just make sure that that is correct. That is the city, and then is also the state that the high school exists in. And this is where you're going to want to, pay a little bit of extra attention in the finances section, because you're just going to want to make sure that the information you put in here matches its relevant counterpart on your tax returns if you did file taxes for that year. So if you had an IRA rollover into another IRA qualified plan, we'll say Riot did not have such. So you will just have to put zeros here. And then for a pension rollover into an IRA or other qualified plan, most students, I think, might know. If you know the answer is not zero, then you sounds like you already would know what the answer is. But if you don't know what these are, then you most likely, they wouldn't be applicable to you. So you just put zero. This question is important to remember and kind of keep in the back of your head. This question says the amount of college grants, scholarships, or AmeriCorps benefits reported as income to the IRS. So just because you received a scholarship at some point or a grant um, doesn't mean that you reported it on your taxes. So when you get a scholarship from an institution or something, most of the time you'll receive a tax form, like a relevant tax form, and you may or may not have reported that specifically on your taxes as IRS, or sorry, as income. So you will most likely be putting zero in the spot, because if you go ahead and check on your tax return, if you have something, if you have an actual number in that spot, you would put that there. But if you have nothing in the question on your 1040, usually you would just put zero here. So most students aren't reporting their scholarships or grants on their taxes unless they're receiving so much that it covers like way more, and then they would be reporting it. So in most cases, you would be putting zero here, but you just want to refer to your taxes for this. Same with the foreign earned income exclusion. Most students aren't going to be reporting that on their taxes, and it gives you the line here to check for. So it's going to be line 8D on your 1040. So if there's nothing there on your tax form, you're just going to put zero here. So you just want to kind of keep these in mind. They can be a little bit tricky. If you're putting a number anywhere other than zero, make sure that you have its IRS counterpart that you're referencing, because you don't want to have a mismatch essentially with your tax info. And then this is just where you're going to put assets. So you would just, reference your total cash savings or checking accounts. Everybody's is going to be different. We'll say the student, maybe they just don't have a whole lot right here. So we could just go ahead and say for their net worth and investments, including real estate. I mean, a lot of students who are graduating high school, probably don't have big investments in real estate. So maybe we'll just go ahead and say zero here. And then same with net worth of businesses. Maybe they don't own a farm. Again, we were talking a little bit about some of the changes from before. For students who own fish hatcheries, I believe they did change the way that you would be reporting out on your FAFSA. But in most cases, I think if you don't own any farm property, you would just be putting zero there. Also, if you have a business with under 100 employees, you would need to report that as well. So this is where you're going to be selecting your colleges that you would want to put down. And like I said, you can choose up to 20. So you just want to make sure that you keep those. You can put our school code here. So our school code is 001154. I wonder if it actually shows up here. So these colleges, they aren't representative of the actual colleges on the FAFSA forms, because it's just the prototype. So we'll just pretend like we see SF State here. It's definitely this one. So Otherwise, you can just type in the name, or sorry, rather, you type in the state and then you kind of whittle it down the same way that you did to the high school section. So we'll say I want to go to there's this Californian school in Arlington called Brown that I really want to go to, and then so you would just add it right here. You would hit select and then add it, and then you'll notice this says 2 out of 20 has been selected, so you can just select up to 20. You'll select every school that you're applying to. Okay. And then once you've done that, you can go ahead and move forward with the continue down here. And you'll just sort of be doing a double take, making sure that the colleges you put on here are accurate. You're going to want to make sure if you're applying to SFSU that you are adding San Francisco State University, and not accidentally putting a different state school or like Florida State University or like CCSF or something, or USF or something like that. You just want to make sure that the name of the school is completely accurate. So you go ahead and hit continue here. And this is the section where you invite your parent as a contributor. So like we were saying before, your contributor is going to need to make an FSA ID. So they'll do similarly what you did, where you logged into studentaid.gov and then made an account. This is where you're going to put in their email. So we'll say I'm sending it to my mom. We'll call her mom. This is her email um, at fun.com, I guess. So this is definitely my mom's email, and go ahead and send that to her. And you can go ahead and continue here because you're essentially done with your portion. The last thing you'll need to do is just review all of your information. This is pretty important. You want to make sure that you really want to make sure that you submit it right the first time because corrections can kind of take a while. It is important, of course, to get everything done before the deadline, but you just want to make sure that when you're hitting submit, you're not rushing through it and skipping over some important information. So just your personal identifiers here, and then personal circumstances, along with your demographics and financials. Everything's just in order as the way we just did it. And then the colleges you listed. And then lastly, the contributor. So you're going to want to make sure that their email is correct, and that they're the parent. And then the invite code will also be emailed to them. And the status will say invite sent. You're going to want to make sure that it was sent to them, and you hit continue here. And then now you are just signing off saying, yes, everything is real and true. And I, Raya Tran, agree that this is all real and true. And you go ahead and hit sign student section. And now you've done it. You have submitted your application, and you just now need to uh, do the parents portion. So we don't have to do the parents portion right now, but I will just kind of show you um, what that looks like when they accept it. So this is me signing in as or wait, let me actually go back here. So this is the parent section. When you are receiving the contributor's email, it will look like this. So you'll get an email from Department of Education that'll say, oh, the student, is sending you an invitation to their FAFSA. So you're going to need to save this code down here. You can just copy this to your clipboard and then hit accept invitation. And then now you'll be signing in through the parent side. And then this is that invitation code. So this is really just punch that in. And then you are agreeing to share your information here when you hit accept. And then now you'll do the parents portion of the FAFSA. Okay. So I think we can take a quick break right there. I know we kind of talked for a bit about everything, but I want to go ahead and let me just refresh this really quick, and I'll go ahead and hold on a page and we can talk a little bit about sort of the next steps here. Because after you've submitted the FAFSA, you can expect within mid to late January for those preliminary awards to show up. So let me just go ahead and get to the end here. So it's a little slow. There we go. So like I said, once you've submitted everything you would need for that FAFSA, as long as everything's good and it gets processed, we can expect to see those preliminary awards for the 26-27 year appear in mid-January. Our contact info is over there on the right. We can be emailed at finaid@sfsu.edu, and we also have our phone number posted there as well. A notable FinAid Friday is December 5th because that's the 26-27 parent FAFSA walkthrough. So that's where we will have a presentation about similarly to what I did, but it'll be the parent section. So that is a pretty important FinAid Friday to keep in the back of your head if you have questions about what the parent side looks like. And there's also a federal aid estimator down here, which can kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what your aid might look like, once you've submitted your financial information. And then I'll leave it right here for some of our resources where you could save this and then just, check out our outreach hub where we have Zoom advising Monday through Friday, 1 to 4, where you can essentially log in and do a one-on-one with a counselor and someone can help you with any, financial aid questions you have. Also, our list of future FinAid Fridays are listed on that link right below. And then below that are our one-stop hours from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And then Friday we start at 10 a.m. and then go till 5 p.m. And that's the first floor of the Student Services building, along with our contact info right there. So I'll go ahead and pause it right there. Do we have any questions that anyone might have?